Hello, hello. I truly appreciate you joining me, Mr. Viva Frei. I'm excited for this conversation to clear up some of the confusion and murkiness surrounding this Trump indictment, arraignment, potential arrests, and what's going on in the world of politics. How are you doing today?
Very good yourself.
Man, I'm having a good one. I'm so excited for this interview, because I think we're going to get some actual truth out there, which is a thing that I'm seeing missing a lot in media. Speaking of that, I think this might be the perfect way to start the interview. I'm going to read you a tweet from the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and I want to get your thoughts on this. The grand jury.
I think I know which tweet
Oh, you know
you're
this
going
one?
for on this. Oh yes, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Okay. The grand jury has acted upon the facts and the law. No one is above the law, and everyone has the right to a trial to prove innocence. Hopefully, the former president will peacefully respect the system, which grants him the right. The thing I found confusing, and I think a lawyer such as yourself will as well, is the trial to prove innocence. Now, I'm no lawyer. I don't speak legalese, but I kind of assumed we were all innocent till proven guilty. Now, did I miss something? Did they update the Constitution, or what's going on there?
You didn't miss anything. I don't know. I don't want to sound hyper partisan. You didn't miss anything except for the fact that Nancy Pelosi said the quiet part out loud. They've revealed their inner communism. Look, I'm a Canadian lawyer. I'm a Quebec attorney.
Okay.
So, I've learned a lot about American law and politics. But a grade school child knows about the presumption of innocence, which is not specifically outlined in the Constitution of the United States of America. Due process is, which implies the presumption of innocence. You don't go to a trial to prove innocence. You go to a criminal trial where the Crown or the prosecution, Crown is Canadian, has the obligation to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Nancy Pelosi is basically outing herself as the communist that many people feel that she is, that the power lies in the accusation. Let him prove his innocence at trial is exactly the inversion of what is supposed to happen, has to happen. But I like to say it's a bit of persuasion, or what's the word? Laying the groundwork for a prospective jury. They're going to now come into this thing and say, well, he's got to prove his innocence, so the burden is on him, which is a complete inversion of the process.
To me, when I read that, and I love the community notes on Twitter, but my jaw hit the ground because to me, this is so much of the political theater. If it happened, obviously when this was read, people who supported her yeah, and then people who don't, or maybe particularly against Trump, they're like, this is how we should be doing things. It just blows my mind, because if it was inverted, someone else saying this, let's just flip the sides, the other half is going to be losing their mind. And to me, this is just a dangerous game to be playing, because ideally the law should be applied equally to everyone. It shouldn't matter your political affiliation. And my biggest concern, and a lot of the confusion I see out there about this whole craziness right now, the political legal saga with Trump, is, okay, is there legal questions going on, or is it more political theater? And right now we seem to be in some sort of gray area where is it kind of a political hit job, or are we actually just looking into someone potentially breaking the law? So I feel very honored to speak with someone with legal knowledge of this situation, just to get through some of these basic questions.
And I'll preface this by just making sure everybody understands. I'm not an American lawyer and not a criminal lawyer, but I've made sense of this to myself, and I'm able to understand the legalese behind this. And I've had the same questions. Is this politics? What are the basis of the charges? How do you get 34 indictments out of what amounts to one act? And I've made sense of it to myself. Statute of limitations, the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. So I've made sense of this to myself, so I think I can probably explain it to other people who have similar questions. But just to answer the first one first, this is pure political theater. It's kabuki theater. It is a political witch hunt. And we'll discuss it in more detail in a little bit. If this is what they go after Trump for, everyone should bear in mind that Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid a fine to the FEC for having mischaracterized their payment for the Steele dossier in the 2016 election. The Steele dossier, everyone bearing in mind, was that false, fabricated, bogus opposition research financed by Hillary Clinton and the DNC that was then leaked to the FBI via their attorney, who charged the Clinton campaign for that meeting. The FBI leaked that bogus Steele dossier to Yahoo News, who published an article that the FBI then relied on to get unlawful FISA spy warrants. They mischaracterized their payment for that. They're financing that. So if this is good for the goose, it should be good for the gander. And I don't even mean to equate both of those in terms of culpability, because one is far worse than the other. But this all amounts to the allegation that Trump made a hush payment to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, It was in fact a disguised campaign contribution, and he falsified business records by passing it off as legal services to be paid to Michael Cohen.
Okay. So with
His
that,
lawyer.
I would love to get into the details of it. So late March of 2023, we find out that former President Trump is indicted. And then early April, we found out he's being arraigned. So could you tell us a little bit about that process? You referred to the 34 felonies that he's being indicted on. I was reading a little bit before this that some legal minds are referring to this as stacking. And to them, that makes it seem like it doesn't like carry enough oomph. Like they're worried that maybe the case is actually light, and like that kind of makes people lean a little bit towards this being political theater rather than a proper legal exploration. But could you clear up maybe the timeline, who's involved? I'm reading about Alvin Bragg, and apparently he was running for DA. His whole campaign was essentially like, I'm going to bring court to justice. Like that seemed to be his thing. I'm reading a little bit about the judge who was assigned to the case. I believe I read that the daughter worked on the Biden administration. Like I just want to wade through what's fact and what's fiction.
That's all fact. I mean, it's so absurd. You'd think it was fiction.
Okay.
Alvin Bragg is this vigorous DA who was indirectly subsidized by George Soros. Now, people were saying the idea that Soros funded this DA, it's fake news. Fact checkers, I say, are wordsmiths of the devil, because George Soros didn't directly fund Alvin Bragg with $1 million. He funded it indirectly through, it's a PAC political action committee called the Color of Change, as far as I understand. He gives $1 million to the Color of Change. The Color of Change, as a political action committee, then turns around and vigorously supports Alvin Bragg's election campaign, and he gets elected to district attorney. So the people are going to say it's not true that Soros backed this DA. It is true. It's just done indirectly, what they can't really do directly, in the same way, Fauci funded gain of function in Wuhan, China, but not directly through a third-party NGO, Eco Alliance, whatever it's called. So that is true. Alvin Bragg literally ran on a campaign of going to persecute Donald Trump for something. They had looked into this a couple of years ago and decided not to prosecute it because it didn't get prosecuted federally. They determined that there was no basis to go after Trump federally for this. Hush payments are not illegal. We'll get there in a second. Okay. Two of the assistant attorneys, I forget what their titles were, within Bragg's office resigned out of protest because they were so gung-ho about going after Trump. 2 years later, Bragg reopens this investigation, or continues to look into it, and decides that they can now bring charges on what is referred to as a novel legal theory. Jonathan Turley, someone who is far from right-wing, says that this is a novel legal theory that is not baseless, but very dubious. And if you're going to test a novel theory for an indictment, you don't do it for the first time ever against a former president, leading candidate for the GOP. The novel legal theory is this. It is all premised on this hush payment to Stormy Daniels in particular, but they lump together in the statement of fact in support of the indictment 3 other payments made. They're called catch and kills. So pay for the story, acquire the rights, sign an NDA, and then don't publish it. Hence, catch the story, kill the story. It's pretty standard in politics. It's pretty standard everywhere. There's any number of reasons why you might want to buy a story, sign NDAs, and then make sure that people can't go blabbing their mouths about something which might be true, might not be true, but might be prejudicial either way. So there were 3 of these. Okay. One of the 3, even as per the statement of fact in support of the indictment, which is this longer document detailing the facts, one of the 3 was a fake story. It was a doorman that used to work for Trump or with Trump or in the building who said that Trump fathered a child out of wedlock. They paid this guy to be quiet. Turns out that story was false. But this is one of the 3 catch and kills that the statement of fact mentions. The big one is Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels alleges, although she admitted at one point it didn't happen, she alleges they had an affair. And Trump paid her $130,000 to shut up about it. The statement of fact goes on to detail, and the indictment is based on this idea that the payment of $130,000 was then disguised. Instead of saying, okay, this is a NDA hush payment, we're going to call this Michael Cohen legal services and structure it in a way that Donald Trump can pay the amount and then some to Michael Cohen without having to disclose that it was a hush payment to a porn star to silence her on an alleged affair that they had. Okay. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty already and went to jail for I think it was basically having lied about this. He said he made the payment personally, unbeknownst to Trump, and it therefore exceeded campaign contributions to a campaign. That would be a crime.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he pleaded guilty to, which thus makes this entire claim totally illogical, because if it wasn't Michael Cohen making this payment unbeknownst to Trump for the benefit of Trump, thus violating campaign finance laws, it means that Trump actually made the payment to Stormy Daniels. And the DA now is trying to say, well, that violated limit laws, campaign donation limit laws, but Trump is not bound by limits to his own campaign. So there's an argument that if it was in fact Trump who made the payment to Stormy Daniels for the benefit of his campaign, well, the campaign finance laws as relates to the caps for donations doesn't apply to the individual himself. He can donate as much as he wants to his own campaign. When Cohen admitted to this, he was implicitly and specifically stating that he made the donation, he made the campaign payment, unbeknownst to Trump, and therefore he broke the law. So they're sucking and blowing legally here, but bottom line, they're saying Trump made this payment to Stormy Daniels. They concocted a scheme with Michael Cohen, which was to say, how do we disguise this $130,000? We want to pay it to you as legal services. So let's take this amount of money, let's lump it together with another $50,000. We're up to $180,000. Let's double it. So we'll pay you, Michael Cohen, $360,000, and then we're going to pay you a monthly retainer to reimburse you this amount, or to pay you on a retainer this amount. It'll come to the equivalent of $420,000. And the reason why they doubled the amount was that, to the extent it was going to now become income for Michael Cohen, they were basically compensating him for the taxes he would have to pay on that deemed income. Whereas if it was in fact just a reimbursement of an expense, it wouldn't be deemed income. So Michael Cohen wouldn't have to pay tax on the reimbursement of an expense that he incurred.
The way I see it from an onlooker with the legal aspect of it seems so tied up in the intricacies of like, oh, it's payment classification and all that. And right away, I just think that the average person loses interest. I'm not saying that it's not interesting. Like, I think politically it's important to track what's going on here to like make sure that our legal system isn't like, just becoming almost like a political hit tool. But right there, like I look at it from the outside, I'm like, it's a classification of a payment. As you alluded to, it's not illegal to pay someone off for a story to not get out there. Like if you want to own the rights to a story, like whatever, let's say that you or I did it, that's fine. But that does bring up a question. And I just thought of this. Is it different if you're running an election? Like the way you and I could buy a story, is there a difference there?
There is a difference from what I understand, from what, legal minds with expertise in this area have specified. If it were in fact bona fide, solely, exclusively for the purposes of impacting a campaign, then it might be treated differently. If there's any other consideration to this, then the payment is not exclusively for the benefit of a campaign. It could just be to prevent the wife from getting upset about, public debate. So there might be a nuance there in terms of whether or not the payment was intended to be specifically, exclusively for the benefit of a campaign. But when you say, like it's complicated and people lose interest, that's what they want, because people are going to lose interest. And if depending on their partisan alignment, they're going to say, I don't care what it was. He's being charged with 34 indictments. It's got to be serious. You don't indict someone with 34 charges if it's not serious. I don't get into the accounting. I just want the top line. He's been charged with 34 indictments. Gotcha. That's where they intend to make it complicated for those who don't want to or can't understand it. So they just come away with the top line, 34 indictments. But listen to this, because it's preposterous for anybody who goes through it. I'm going through the indictment, and all that I'm seeing is count 1, invoice. Count 2, entry in the books. Count 3, writing a check. Count 4, and it's all relating to a payment made on the same date. Oh, these were February. Then count 5 is March. The same charges: invoice, payment, entry in the ledgers, and another one. Then you get to where we're at now. Count 13 for January, February, for February, March, for April, for May. So they've taken this one payment, which was devised to be reimbursed over the course of 9 months. They've taken each of the monthly installments, the invoice as one indictment, the writing of the check as its second indictment, the entry in the ledgers of the books as the third indictment, and the vouchers, I don't even know what the vouchers are, as the fourth. So you get 4 indictments per payment on a 9-month installment, give or take, for the 130,000. It's trumped up is not the ironic, pun intended, way to describe this. It's preposterous. And it's so preposterous that even rabid, frothing at the mouth Trump haters are saying, this is weak, it's going to look political, and it's going to actually end up helping his campaign.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue from a financial standpoint, which is like more of the aspect I've been personally tracking. I think he's already raised multiple millions of dollars off of it. Like, to me, it's that same mindset of almost a little bit of what we saw with Andrew Tate. And like, we could talk about that like later in a different interview. But this concept of if people really don't like him and you want to bring him down, they seem to be doing the things that are making him bigger. Like, it's just, it blows my mind. Like, psychologically, they just need a better PR team. Like this, if you're going to come after someone, like, you have to make it juicy where the public can bite into it and be like, yeah, but as you're saying now, it's this headline driven thing where it's apparently they took one payment and stacked it up. And like people, the more they talk about it, they're like, that's boring.
Stacked it up and then also had to circumvent statute of limitations.
Yes, we'll love to talk about that.
So they turned it into a felony as opposed to what it would have otherwise been a misdemeanor. Because a misdemeanor, from what I understand, statute of limitations is 2 years. A felony is 5 years. And so how do they upgrade it to a felony? Well, they charge it under this other provision where the underlying fraudulent aspect of the payment had to be a crime in and of itself. So therefore, they can up it to a felony, which gives them a 5-year statute of limitations, which is still going to pose its own problems.
Okay.
The problem is, and I put together this highlight of Alvin Bragg's press conference afterwards, everybody's asking, what is the underlying crime of the payment? Hush payments are not illegal. So they say the payment made to defraud or in furtherance of another crime. And everyone's like, what is the other crime? And so you have Alvin Bragg now suggesting, although it's not specifically stated in the indictment, that the underlying crime is some election laws. Then the question becomes, can the underlying crime for state charges be a federal election law? And that too is by no means answered, clearly in the affirmative. Can a state law that's predicated, a state felony that's predicated on an underlying commission of a crime, can it be a federal crime? Especially when the federal decided not to prosecute for this very same fact pattern alleged crime. So there's that. Even if you get past the felony aspect of this and you accept that it's upgraded to a felony, statute of limitations is 5 years. The last payment was December 2017, which would bring us into the statute of limitations would be set to expire December 2017. They've indicted him, give or take, March 2023. How did they get there? Well, the last payment was made in December 2017, but apparently they filed the papers in 2018, thus ratifying the last 9 months of payments. Therefore, all get swept up into sort of a renewed, or not really suspended, but they get ratified in 2018. So 5 years runs from 2018. So that's even if you accept all of this and you get to the felony, there's still a problem with the statute of limitations, even under the theory of the case. Now, another theory as to how they're going to get past, or an argument they're going to raise to address the statute of limitations problem, is that the statute of limitations was told, it's the American term for suspended, while Trump was out of the state. So if he was not in the state for the authorities to serve, to prosecute, statute of limitations is sort of suspended. So while he was off in Washington being president, the statute of limitations had been told, therefore they still have some time left.
Interesting.
Sorry, go for it.
Oh, no, like I've never heard of that, so I appreciate you sharing it. Very quickly, just to rewind to the concept of this, of like maybe making it, I believe it's called a Class C felony, to hide a larger crime. That quote unquote larger crime, as we're filming this now, is that publicly known? Is that something that we find out in December, which I'm reading is the next time this will be in court and publicly discussed? Do we have any concept of what that truly is?
We have a concept because Bragg sort of alluded to it, although he did also say it doesn't specify the indictment because by law we're not legally required to do it. Bull crap. I mean, for goodness sake, you're going after the president, specify what the underlying crime is. They're alluding to either state election law or federal election law. And again, he alluded to this. I don't know how state election law could work for a federal election. These are some nuances that, as a Canadian attorney, I will appreciate. I may not be understanding, but he's alluded to the fact that it's federal election laws, potentially exceeding campaign finance, campaign donation to one's own campaign. And then there's the argument as to who made the hush payment. So if it wasn't Donald Trump personally and it was done through a company, which it seems to be, well, that company would be bound by donation caps. So maybe that's where the underlying federal crime is. But the bottom line is, the feds had already looked into this and declined to prosecute. And Bragg himself declined to prosecute 2 years ago. he had two lawyers or whatever, assistant ADAs or whatever, resign from his office. And one of the questions they asked him during the press conference is, what changed between 2 years ago and today? Oh, well, we've got new evidence. Bullcrap. You know what their new evidence probably is? The words of a proven, admitted perjurer, liar, Michael Cohen. So Michael Cohen is now on the record as having said both A and not A on two separate occasions. He's a confirmed liar. So they're relying on presumably the testimony of a confirmed, admitted, he went to jail for liar, Michael Cohen. That's their new evidence.
That's absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, please, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like not just you, but I'm reading a lot of where like this doesn't just seem to have the gusto behind it. It doesn't really seem to be maybe the strongest case. And of course, this could change, but a couple questions here. So is it true that the next time we'll get any major update related to this is in December? And also, second question is, if you had to play devil's advocate to your current understanding of the situation, like, how do you think this could go? Like, is there a particular aspect of it that you think could bite the former president in the ass? Like, is there a part that you're like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting? Or like across the board, are you like, no, your money would be betting on the fact that this is just dismissed, or whatever the proper legal term would be?
The first things first, yeah. From my understanding, the next hearing date is in 9 months. Like they're gonna, I think, go for scheduling for a trial, which is expected to be next year. It'll take a long time. There's going to be preliminary motions. I don't know if they fleshed out all of the interim stuff as of now. There will be interim motions to dismiss because there's legal issues here that don't need to be tried by a jury that might, off the bat, dismiss this lawsuit. Just before we forget, actually, the judge, what's his name? Juan Marchand. I remember I keep pronouncing his name as it sounds French, but he is in fact the judge who has presided over other cases involving Trump Enterprises, Trump allies. To say that one can predict his political or ideological inclinations is an understatement. It's obvious. It's a massive coincidence how this judge is randomly assigned this case. The Twitter dispute that occurred the other day, where AOC, who's this other guy? Kevin, not Greenwald. There's another journalist who's accusing Donald Trump Jr. of intimidating the judge by posting a picture of the judge's daughter online. And I was shocked by that. I was like, well, why would they be posting? I presume the kid, they're posting pictures of I thought the kid was a young kid in school. I didn't realize the judge's daughter is a politically active individual who worked on the Biden Kamala Harris campaign, supported Kamala. So yeah, the daughter of the judge is politically active and vehemently anti-Trump. The judge is quite clearly anti-Trump. So there's partisan issues going on with the appearance of justice or objectivity with the judge himself. So set that aside. Yeah, the next date is in a long time, and expect there to be a lot of interim motions to dismiss for legal grounds. The second part, playing devil's advocate, it's impossible to steelman this the other way because it's frivolous on its face. The idea is that Trump. It's just very difficult because statute of limitations is a problem. Past decisions not to prosecute is a problem. Timing is very convenient. The massive trumping up of this indictment to 34 charges, which all stem from one alleged hush money payment, it's transparently bogus. The only issue is that the power lies in the accusation. You get the headlines in the interim, even if it's dismissed at a later date. If I'm going to steelman it, it's going to a jury trial if it gets there in the state of New York, in a district which is clearly anti-Trump. So it doesn't even matter how baseless the lawsuit is. It's sufficiently complicated that a jury might not even understand the nuances and just convict because there's so much there. There has to be some fire behind all this smoke. It's sort of like the Washington prosecutions of the January 6th defendants. You think these jury members know what seditious conspiracy is, a charge that has barely been tried in the history of the United States, and they can convict in a matter of hours? It's politics, it's jury pool, and so you can get lucky just so long as you get a jury that says, I don't understand it, but me no like Trump, and this looks bad.
I might not be using the right term, but inherently this is political, and the judge has a political bias or clear ties to it. Isn't the right word recuse? Like maybe I'm just missing something here, but I thought if there was like a clear bias, or even for jurors, like that's a common thing always shown in like movies and sitcoms or whatever of like, hey, do you know about this? If you do, like, you're not going to be a juror. Do you already have a bias? But like, I thought that was the same thing with judges, that they clearly had a bias. I thought they had to go to the next judge. Am I missing something?
No, that's it. You know which judge determines whether or not they recuse a judge from a file?
No.
The judge accused of bias. The judge who is asked to recuse himself determines whether or not he or she recuses himself. You know how often you succeed on a motion for a judge? The only judge that would recuse themselves is one that is sufficiently conscious of their bias to do it. Now, in a jury trial, people should understand this. The judge adjudicates on matters of law, and the matters of fact are submitted to the jury for consideration. So a lot of the legal questions are going to be decided. Well, not a lot. All of the legal questions are going to be decided by the judge. The judge will never recuse himself. They can make a motion. It will get nowhere. What might get somewhere is a motion for change of venue or change of venue. So they can maybe get to a venue where they can maybe hope to get a less biased jury pool, one that's been less tainted by the media. But even good luck with that. They tried that in January 6th. It didn't work. They tried it with Alex Jones, I think, and it didn't work. I'm not sure if they did. I might be getting confused with Alex Jones, but they've tried it in a number of cases. It was Chauvin. I'm 99% certain it was Chauvin where they asked for a change of jurisdiction, because how are they going to get a fair trial in that area? So that's the motion that might be more likely to succeed.
Gotcha.
But the judges determine themselves whether or not they recuse themselves, and it doesn't happen very often.
Interesting. Well, truly, thank you for your time here. When there's any other updates, you're more than invited to come back. I appreciate the conversation. Before I let you go, just for people who want to stay like a little bit more in tune with any of the legal developments, obviously in Canada and the US, where's the best place to find you? Shout out your socials, just because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to track you down.
I happen to be wearing our own merch, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. That's VIVA Barnes ES, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. That's on Locals. That's where we discuss all of this stuff. Weekly live streams on Rumble. And I'm on Rumble, Viva Frei, Twitter, the Viva Frei, because some old account has Viva Frei. And then, I'll be doing updates as these things progress. It'll probably be a little quiet right now. Now it's going to be political spin and this and that, but we talk about a bunch of other stuff. So Viva Frei on Rumble, the Viva Frei on Twitter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, where you can support us and get all the latest and a ton of exclusive stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And could you give us a little bit of a taste? So when you do content, is it always related to like everything going on the political scene, but through a legal lens? Is that like the best way to describe like their content?
It started off as just legal analysis, and I'm still objective, but I would be reluctant to give my opinion 5 years ago. I never appreciated how much law and politics were fundamentally intertwined until 2020. So it's legal analysis, political commentary, and just some wild news and culture war commentary, because that also seems to be absolutely unavoidable these days.
Man, that sounds great. Everyone, definitely check it out. From me and also all the audience, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.